Hey guys, welcome back. It's May 10th or so. I don't know what day it is, but it's May something. And we are going to first correct an error that I made. I mentioned when we were putting the drive shaft together in the clutch housing video that we install the drive shaft and the coupler a certain way, and I was actually backwards. So we're going to correct that, and I'm going to explain why we're correcting it. I also had a few questions regarding the seals and some bearings, and why I'm doing things the way I'm doing it as far as that stuff goes. One of the things that's been brought up, I'm taking the camera with me here, is the seals on a lot of things, like the brake and clutch pedal shaft, the bull pinion seals that are behind the brake drums. Let's see, there's a number of other ones that are doubled up, and the reason that I'm doubling them up is, well, there's a couple reasons, but the first reason is sometimes those shafts have a wear ring in them, because the original rawhide seals that were in them, or leather seals, had one single spring in them a lot of times, and they have a groove wore into them because that leather has worn away and that spring has been riding directly on the shaft. So that can cause a leak if you don't use what's called a speedy sleeve, which is essentially a sleeve that slides over the shaft to give a new seal surface, and then they also have different size sleeve or seals that fit with those sleeves. So that's an option that you can do. Otherwise, what I did was I double sealed them, because the original rawhide seals were, I'm just going to throw a measurement out there. Let's say they were a 1/2 inch thick. Well, the new style seals are only about a 1/4 inch thick. So you can actually double them up and get 2 of those new style rubber seals in a seal bore where there was an original rawhide seal. So one thing to keep in mind with doubling up seals is you always want to grease them very liberally when you put them together before you assemble whatever it is that's going into that area that the seal is sealing against, because if you don't, that outer seal is going to run dry, and it's pretty much going to render it useless because it'll burn up that rubber. So that should take care of the questions that I've been getting on the seals. Now the bearings, I've been getting some people asking me why I'm not packing all the bearings with grease prior to assembly. Most of that was because of like the belt pulley assembly, and I didn't pack that simply because I think I packed one bearing in it just because it's difficult to get to, but the other bearings will be oiled prior to installing that on the transmission housing, and I'm not going to install the belt pulley assembly until the primer and the paint is done, because if you look here, the belt pulley mounts here, but then it hangs out over the front of the clutch housing. Okay, it hangs out to about, I want to say about here. So the problem with that is you're not going to be able to get the underside of the belt pulley housing or the top side of the clutch housing adequately with paint. So I'm going to paint this just like it is here with the engine, and then I'm going to paint the belt pulley assembly separately. And after all that is done, I'm going to tip it over, and I'm going to oil the heck out of the inside, spin everything around, make sure there's oil on everything, and then I'll install it. That way we're not getting oil all over everything prior to paint. I mean, there's already some grease and fingerprints on everything, but that's why I've already picked up our primer here. But when you do primer and paint, you want to pick up some wax and grease remover, and you have to wipe down the whole entire tractor, all the pieces, just to get any wax or grease off of the components. And that's pretty much why I'm not putting oil or grease in anything or on anything, unless it's something I really can't get to. Or it's like a shaft that has something sliding on it, then I'll put some grease on it. But I had to question why I didn't fill up the transmission prior to putting the top deck on, because it would be easier. Well, it would be easier, but at the same time, I've put oil in these transmissions so many times that it's just second nature. You know, I've got a really big funnel, it works great, so I don't have to worry about spilling anything, because it really does a great job of you know, allowing oil to quickly drain out of the funnel and into the differential in the rear end. So I don't really want to put any fluids in anything until I know it's all together, and that's kind of my last step before we fire it up. So yeah, so let's basically what I've been working on the last day or so is getting the rattle can paint stripped off of the engine block and everything, and it's mostly gone. I just got to get the wire wheel out and go over a few tight areas, you know. So basically what I did though to get rid of that rattle can paint, you can see the primer's still on here, but I wanted to protect against anything, so as far as rust goes. But what I did was I just took some paint thinner, put it in my HVLP gun, soaked the entire motor down, you know, waited 5 to 10 minutes, and then I took my air nozzle and I just blew everything off, and that paint literally just flew right off. So yeah, that's what I had to do, and it looked like it worked pretty well. So there's only some small areas left that I'm going to get with the wire wheel, and we should be good to go and ready to take this thing out of the stand, mount the flywheel and clutch to it, and mount it to the clutch housing. So let's get this moved out of the way though, get the engine hoist moved, and then we're gonna fix the drive shaft issue really quick. We should be able to do it without having to pull the clutch throw out bearing and everything. So let's go ahead and get that fixed and we'll move on. Okay guys, so basically what I was describing before was this plate here that goes in between the drive shaft and the coupling shaft for the input shaft on the transmission. It has a kind of a S curve to it, and the way I described it before was that the S curve needed to be dished in or towards the rear, and that is incorrect. So, and I stated that because I was under the impression or understanding that with it dished in, it would be far enough back to where it wouldn't cause interference with the pilot bearing and flywheel assembly, clutch and all that. But it actually needs to be dished forward, because without it dished forward, it won't be long enough for the front of the drive shaft to seat into the pilot bearing, which will cause a major issue. Now I'm pretty sure, I'm not positive, but when I took this apart, I'm pretty sure the piece was installed backwards, and Oh, let's see here. I'm probably going to need a pry bar, but I'm pretty sure that piece was installed backwards because this drive shaft had a lot of wobble in it when I took it apart. So I'm not gonna guarantee, but I'm thinking it had been installed backwards. But I've got the first two nuts off the bolts for the drive shaft portion. So let me get these off here. And I'm probably going to need a pry bar to get this apart, but that's okay. And we can't really use the ratchet end on the back side. So, but for sakes of saving battery on the GoPro, I'll get these bolts loose. I'll separate the drive shaft and we'll get that bracket flipped around. So, but I'll show you guys what that should look like once the bracket's flipped around. So, okay, so looking up from the bottom, which is where I said I wasn't going to be, and that's why I tried to install the clutch or the drive shaft first prior to the clutch housing, was I could be standing over the top and do it. But this is how it should look. So this middle bracket here should be curved out towards the front to push the drive shaft forward. If it's the other way around, it'll be curved towards the rear, and that'll pull the drive shaft back, thereby pulling it away from the pilot bearing and the clutch. Now the clutch will work, but the pilot bearing won't be riding on the end of the shaft, which is right here, and that's what will cause you issues. See, now when I took this apart, this thing was wobbling all over the place, but a lot of it was due to probably bad bushings in these cupped washers here. So there's, geez, wrenches are falling all over, but there's a total of 8 rubber bushings, or I guess vibration isolators, that that go on these bolts for the drive shaft coupler. So that's probably a big part of why it was wobbling around so much. But now that we've got that corrected, we can work on getting the rest of this paint stripped off the engine block, and then get the clutch and flywheel installed and get the engine bolted up, and that'll be it. So she'll be ready for primer. Okay guys, we've got the engine pretty much stripped to the best of my ability as far as the paint goes, and we are going to install the flywheel on the back now. I've got the flywheel, I sandblasted and polished the surface that both mates to the crankshaft as well as the clutch disc surface. And this flywheel can only go on one way because it's got a pin on it. So we'll go ahead and get this thing on here, and then we can tighten everything down. The flywheel bolt torque specs are 67 foot-pounds. There are not any torque specs in the manual, so I had to do a little bit of Googling on the old interweb, and found out that it's supposed to be 67 foot-pounds on the flywheel torques, or the flywheel bolt torque. So we'll go ahead and give this a shot. It's been my experience that getting the pin started is the toughest part. So hopefully I'm not in the way here as far as okay, so we're on the pin. Our flywheel bolts are here with the locks that were so graciously provided by Squatch. So thank you again, Squatch, for the locks. Now I've got the engine kind of resting on these 4x4s that are going across the bottom. So that way when I torque this thing, that it doesn't, because you can't do this in the stand, obviously. It's not going to be feasible because the engine stand mount goes right to the back of the engine. There's not enough room to get your flywheel and flywheel bolts in, or your clutch. So we'll go ahead and torque these down to 67 foot-pounds, and then we'll go on to the clutch. Okay, we're all set up here. We've got our new clutch disc. That's going to go in first. We've also got an alignment tool. Put that into the splines and engage that with the pilot bearing. And then I've got 3 longer bolts so that I can install the clutch assembly and get it close to being where it needs to be as far as tightness. I may not even need these actually. Oh yeah. Got to get them started here. One. Two, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now we can go ahead and tighten these. I like to do it similar to how we would do wheel lugs. In a kind of a crisscross pattern, go opposites. These should be tightened to about 25 foot-pounds or so. So we'll go ahead and do that, and then we can go ahead and get the engine in position. Go to the other side. Okay, they're all good all the way around. We'll torque them down to 25 foot-pounds and get them in position. Get the engine in position. Okay, we're going to get this thing slid together and go from there. Challenging part will be getting that drive shaft aligned. Let's see here. Basically what I'm doing is I'm down underneath here. trying to turn the drive shaft so that the clutch and drive shaft splines align. And I have to kind of go back and forth and kind of raise and lower and make sure everything's aligning appropriately. There we go. So I've got the splines aligned. Now I have to ensure that the pins are aligned. And just slowly lower everything into position. Not quite there yet. Give you guys a little bit of a view of what I'm doing here. You can see there's a guide pin here, 2 bolts up top, and a guide pin on the other side. And I'm just trying to wiggle everything together. That might have been a little too much as far as lowering goes. There we go. I got one of the bolts started, but the other one is a little more difficult because it's inside the starter hole. So we'll get this one closer to being sent home, and then we'll work on that inside one. Okay guys, so this bolt here and the bolt inside are the ones that are going to be holding the engine on for now. I got the guide pins aligned, and these 2 bolts should be torqued. I'm going to torque them to a grade 5 bolt torque spec, so that's 112 foot-pounds. That one was already real close. And we got to go down inside and get on the other side here so I can see better. All right, 112 foot-pounds on those, and we'll release the pressure off the engine and we should be good. So that is as far as we're going to go with the assembly on the chassis prior to primer. So we're pretty much ready for primer, aside from cleaning all the surfaces with wax and grease remover. So yeah, we've got a setup here. Here's where we're at. Give you guys a little view of the chassis. sure hope you guys have enjoyed this. It's been a heck of a ride so far, and I can't thank everybody enough for all the support that they've given. And as always, thanks for watching, thanks for wrenching with me, and stay tuned because the next video should be primer. Oh, right, real quick, before we go, I forgot to touch on this. I found in one of the brake drum covers, still a little tacky, but I found a series of rust holes in one of them. It must have been underneath a big clump of grease that was on there prior to sandblasting. So I took some JB Weld and just smoothed it out over there, and once it's dry we'll sand it smooth, and that'll be that. But on the inside I just took some masking tape to keep the JB Weld from bleeding through, and or I should say dripping through the holes. So we should be good once this stuff sets up. I'll give it 24 hours or so, and then we'll start sanding it, and it'll be ready for primer. But I did already coat the insides of them with Gliptol, so that's what it looks like with the Gliptol inside the pan. And yeah, this one looks good. So that's all we've got. So next step, primer. Stay tuned, guys. We'll talk to you soon.